Welcome to the Force Multiplier podcast, where we talk about tactical business strategies, building high-performance sales teams, and growing your business. If you're ready to break free from the status quo and join the ranks of the Mavericks, the Rebels, and the Renegades who refuse to conform and instead build multi-million-dollar businesses, then buckle up, because here we go. Welcome to this episode of the Force Multiplier podcast. For those of you wondering why it's the Force Multiplier instead of the Dropout Multimillionaire, it's because we're changing brands this week. So this will be our first podcast under the new brand Force Multiplier. So don't go away because it's still going to be good. This podcast is based on my Wall Street Journal series of best-selling books, The Dropout Multimillionaire, and No, The Psychology of Sales and Negotiation. I'm your host, Brian Will, and today we're going to be talking to J.M. Ryerson. J.M. is an author, a leadership and performance coach, an international speaker. We're going to get into that in a few minutes. The host of the Let's Go Win podcast, of which I was just on last week. He has been building companies for over 20 years, and today has dedicated himself to helping people around the world live their best lives. In fact, I loved reading some of the goals in his performance coaching program, so I'm going to read them to you because I think they're relevant here. Number 1, enjoy the life you are living right now. 2, develop deeper and more genuine relationships. 3, be more present for your family. That's one I had to work on when I was younger. Discover routines that naturally lead to more success. And finally, find fulfillment in every area of your life. So with that, welcome to the show, JM. How you doing?
Brother, I'm doing amazing. Thank you for having me. Congrats on the rebrand. It's always exciting when you do those rebrands. I had the opportunity with my show at one point, so congrats on it, and I'm sure it'll be awesome.
You know, it's interesting. We launched this because we had written the first book and it became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And so I thought, I'm going to do a podcast on this, not thinking far enough ahead about the fact that I might do something more down the road. So I just launched with this singular idea. And then when we launched the second book and we launched the coaching program and the mastermind, I said, oh, crap, I have pigeonholed myself. I got to get out of this pigeonhole. And then it's tough, if you've done the rebranding like I have, you're thinking, well, I got this audience and now I'm going to confuse everybody and I've already got traction. But at some point, you got to rip that Band-Aid off and just make the change,
Yeah, well, it'll work out because you're such an amazing guy. But it was funny because I did the same thing where the Let's Go Win podcast was initially called Transcendent Life because transcend is a big word for me. I just absolutely love it. But the media firm I'm working with is like, Jam, nobody understands what you're talking about. That's a big word for you. They're like, you're confusing it. Just your Let's Go Win. That's who you are. It's to your core. And I was like, oh, that's really simple.
Yeah, mine was, hey, we'd love you to come speak at the university, but we really can't promote a dropout. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. And we'd like to have you come speak at our company, but yeah, we really don't want to push the dropout. And I was like, dang it. But I love that title, but it's not working. So anyway, I was on your show last week. We had a good time. I was really looking forward to having you back. But, it's interesting. You and I actually share somewhat of a background that's very similar. And I don't know that I picked all this up the last time we talked, but, you came up in the insurance ranks, just like I did. And I want to hear a little bit about that. You've had a couple exits like I did. You've written a couple books like I did. You're into coaching, which I've just launched. So I feel like you're my twin brother from another mother over there.
Well, if the interview that we had was any indication, I so agree, man. When you meet people and they're like, yep, they're going to be in my world for a long, long time. That was just how I felt. And what I loved about your interview is it's authentic, it's tangible and real. It's not some fluff that you just put out there, and you see it all the time. You have expert interviewers, but when you get down to the brass tacks, you're like, what have you actually done? And you've done the work, brother. And that's what I found so refreshing. And I know that resonates with your audience because you've actually done it. You're not asking someone to do something that you're not willing to do. And my best example that I'm doing recently is my son is a tennis player. And one of the things he wants is to have his body be at peak performance. Well, there's this amazing study on CMOS. And I know this is not the topic we're to talk about, but I had him say, all right, bud, there's 91 or 92 essential minerals in this CMOS. I'm going to have you start taking it. And I stopped myself for a moment and said, wait a minute. If I'm going to ask him to do it, I'm going to do it too. And that's one of the things as a leader is don't ask somebody to do something you're not willing to do. And I learned that from my college coach in basketball. He used to ask us to run 2.5 miles every Monday and every Wednesday. And I remember we used to complain and just, oh, it was terrible. And then we found out that Coach Mass was running 5 miles on those days. So not only was he asking us to do it, he was doubling what we were doing. And that was just one of those lessons where it's like, hey, man, don't ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. And I think that's why in the companies that I did build in the insurance world, I never asked somebody to do something that I hadn't already done. And that proved to be, a successful formula, because I wasn't being an armchair quarterback. It was something that I had actually gone through, and I could understand. I know what you're feeling. I know these challenges. I understand what you're going through. And that really seemed to resonate with the people I worked with.
Well, tell me about these, because I don't think we got into this, because when I was on your podcast, I was clearly doing all the talking. That kind of, I think I ran over you on that one. So tell me about these exits you had. Tell me about your background.
Yeah, man. So when I got out of college, I went immediately into enterprise rent-a-car right out, like a lot of kids, the great recruiting program. And what I realized for myself is I didn't like people telling me when I had to be somewhere and how much money I could make. That was not two things that really, freedom is a big word for me. And I didn't feel I had that. So I knew my world in the corporate, it wasn't probably the right fit. And so I started to strike out looking for, opportunities. And I met my soon to be business partner at the time. And we clicked, just like you and I did on the first episode. It's very similar. And what the most attractive thing that he said is, you can go golf every Friday and there's no glass ceiling on how much you can make. The two things, all I needed to hear. And so that launched me into doing financial services. Now, the truth about me with financial services, I am not a real financial guy. Like if you were to ask me about indexes or, returns, or that's not what I was good at. What I was good at is connecting with people, building teams, and leadership. And so for 18 years, I built 3 companies, not just my partner and I built 3 different companies and exited those. And, what I really learned, Brian, is I knew what I was passionate about. And I was passionate about leadership. I was passionate about learning and sharing those lessons. And that's how I ended up getting into coaching, because I'm doing it all the time. I just talk to people. I just was this morning, somebody was talking about something with their dad. And I was like, hey, there's a study on blah, blah, blah. And I went into this whole thing and he's like, how do you know that? I was like, I'm interested when it comes to helping people with peak performance. And so that's really the world I'm in today, is just helping people live their best life in peak performance with mindset and leadership. And those are just the things that I like and that I'm pretty good at.
So we talked about this a little bit, I think, the difference between what we call the technical side of the business and the soft skill side of the business. I think what you're telling me is that your expertise lies in the soft skill side of the business.
Yeah. And that you and I did talk about that briefly, because it's such an interesting term, the soft skills, because I want to reword it. I want to call them essential skills, like actually caring about someone that's on your team. That I don't want that to sound soft. I want that to be like, this is something you just should really do. And that's the truth of the matter is I genuinely like people. I want to see them succeed. Sometimes as a coach, I want it more than them. And that's one thing that has been challenging for me as a coach for 20 years. You can't want it more for someone than they want it for themselves. And that is a lesson I have to continue to remind myself of. And so there's oftentimes as a coach, as a leader, when you're pushing somebody, you're pushing them and you want it so bad for them. That's a lot of times when you need to back off and say, look, this is where we're going, but I need you to want that. And if you don't, that's cool too.
The key to that is it's not even, it's as much that you want it for them, but correct me if I'm wrong, you can literally see it for them. It's right in front of them. And they have this blinder on and they're like, well, I don't see it. And therefore I'm not going to listen to you fully. And you're going, but it's right there. Come on, man. Just reach out and grab it. It's right there. I can see it. Isn't that about right?
It's so true. Well, and this is why everyone, including myself, while I'll always have a coach, because the truth is when you look in the mirror, your lens sees something, but it's typically not the correct view. And the best analogy that I give people is leave a voicemail for yourself and ask yourself, is that how I thought I sounded? For instance, every time I listen to myself, I don't think my voice sounds the way it actually sounds. And that's a reflection of the way I think I sound and the way it's actually coming across to the world. This is why having a coach is so vitally important, because they do see these things where they're like, bro, you are full of potential and energy. And they don't know any of these flaws that you have upstairs that you're thinking about. Well, but I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. All the things that the world has taught you that you're not. Your coach just sees the potential. Your coach sees everything that you're capable of. And that's where, as a great coach, you say, look, man, you don't necessarily see it, but I believe in you. I fully know you can do it. That is so powerful. If as the mentee or as the coaching person, the receiving the coaching, if you can hear that, if you can buy into that, that's where you see people do amazing things.
And this is really a product, and I think we talked about this as well, is if you're going to find a coach, what I always tell people is you need to vet that person very hard. You need to make sure that they have the experience. They've been there, they've done that, they're 10 steps ahead of you. And what you're talking about here is exactly what I'm talking about. It's the experience. It's the coach with the experience to say, I have done it, I have seen it, and that's why I can see it for you. That's why I know it's there. That's why I know you can do it. And we also talked about the filter, right? You talked about it in your, I call it the personal filter. You call it the way that you see the world. Exact same thing. You see the world based on your experience, which is what I call the filter there. So we are tracking 100%, just using a few different words. Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you a couple of selfish questions here since you're on my podcast and I get to ask the questions. Um, how did you get your coaching business started? Like, how did you get that first? You're like, okay, I sold a company. Now I'm going to be, how did you get that first client? How did you bring them in? How did you, and then, because from there it snowballs if you're good at what you do, but how did you get started?
Yeah, brother. I love this question. So I got started. I did not mean to start Let's Go Win. I really didn't. What happened is I wrote the book, Let's Go Win, Keys to Living Your Best Life, for my two sons. My wife and I have a 17-year-old and 13-year-old son. And the whole purpose of the book was so they didn't scratch their knees and bloody them up as many times as I did. Well, the gal I was working with said, man, you're selfish. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, if you only share this book with two human beings, you're selfish. I said, all right, lesson learned, we publish. When that went, immediately I had a good friend of mine say, hey, would you coach my son? I'd like him to lose some weight. I said, sure, I could do that. And so amazing family. The kid that came, his name is Koki. He's an amazing guy. When he walked through my door, he had no idea why he was coming to see me. He just knew me as JM, the guy that comes and eats their amazing sushi. They have 8 sushi restaurants. So anyway, when I asked him, I said, do you know why you're here? He said, I'm sure my dad wants me to lose some weight. Here's the beautiful thing. Yes, he lost 80 pounds in 6 months. That's a fact. But that's not what the beauty of what really happened. What happened is he found his purpose, because he comes from a very traditional Japanese family where the first son, there's a lot of pressure on that first son. There's a lot of expectations. And so he didn't really have his own clear picture where he was going. It was always to please mom and dad, to make sure that they were proud of him. Well, the truth is they were proud of him to begin with. He just didn't know that. So when we started working on, all right, we're going to lose some weight, that's when he flourished. In fact, he met his now wife within 6 months. He found this amazing confidence about him. And the truth is, Brian, it was already inside of him. He just needed to see it. And I could see it with this kid, man. He is just amazing. So that was client one. The second client was a professional golfer that had missed like 12 straight cuts. And I didn't do much, honestly. I asked him, do you love the game? He goes, no. I said, well, why'd you start playing the game to begin with? Because I thought it was fun. I loved it. I said, go have fun.
How did he
makes
find
4
you?
out of them. Another referral. Just another. So it was referral. And then what I realized is I didn't get into the coaching one-on-one space to spend more time away from my family. I had sold these companies so I could spend more time with my family. And now that's where I really just work with corporations and their executive teams, because as much as I love the one-on-one, I do, brother, I love it. I also love spending time with my family. And so that's been kind of the evolution of Let's Go Win, where I work primarily with executives and their teams on their leadership and culture. And what's cool is there's not a company, if they really want to get better, that I know that I can help. I know I can help them, but they have to want it, right? And that's the one formula for every coaching client at this point. They have to want it. If they don't, it's not worth my time or theirs.
It's so funny, and I hate to be redundant here, but my first book was called Life Lessons for My Children, right? And it was a book for my kids. And I literally would say, look, I was alive 30 years before you were born. There's a whole life that you don't know. I want to write a book so that you know where I came from and what I went through and the challenges that I have. And then we always talk about with my children life lessons. And I'd always be like, all right, guys, pay attention. This is a life lesson, right? We're going to learn how to change a tire or, whatever it is. It's a life lesson. And so I started writing this book, and it turned into, people started reading it and they were like, why? What do you mean this is for your kids? You need to publish this thing. And so it took me 5 years to finish the book because I was just piddling around with it, and then finally got it done. And today it's a book, about overcoming past traumatic life and issues that you think are holding you back. But it's also all the life lessons I've given my children throughout the time, so that they'll have this history of me and why I think the way that I do and do the things that I do. So it's just funny, we're still tracking on that exact same thing.
Yeah, we really have some similarities. There's some synergy here, brother. This is amazing. And I
Yeah.
love that you wrote that book. That makes me so happy as a dad. That amazing.
My book has a somewhat of a controversial title. I don't know if we talked about this. My first book's called I Give the Dumb Kids Hope.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
And it's about half the people think I'm calling kids dumb, and the other half are like, no, that's not the point. I'm the kid who failed out of high school at 16. I'm the kid who came from an abusive home. I'm the kid who's told I wasn't worth a piece of crap. And the only thing I'd ever be able to accomplish in life was probably driving a truck. So I needed to get my license to drive a truck, right? I'm the kid who got kicked out of the house. I'm the kid who had bad credit and didn't have any place to go and had to join the military. I was the dumb kid, and yet went on to create, this tremendous financial success. So, and it's a joke about my daughter in high school, and there's a long story behind that, but, that was my first book. So, still interesting that we track so much. So I'm also curious, you said that you don't do a lot of personal stuff anymore. You're doing all corporate stuff. Now, do you market for that? Do you go out and look for these companies, or are you still in the referral phase?
So it's a good question. And recently I've brought on a group of people that are reaching out with not only my network, but starting to reach outside. And here's what I'm trying to find, Brian, because I have the fortune of being able to be very selective of who I want to work with. That's great. I'm very, very blessed, but I have to line up, just like you and I are having synergy on this podcast. I have to align with a corporation or someone that I really believe in, and they believe in what I'm doing. That's the only way it works. So to answer your question, yes, it is opened up more than it had been. And what I was telling my wife is she likes when I go speak on stage, and I'm cool with doing it. It's definitely fun. But you know what I love more than anything? I love doing these podcasts, and I love really working with these corporate teams, because it's what I think is simple and just, it's like, yeah, of course, everybody knows this. I've realized that that's not the case.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those things where when you can show something that is, in my opinion, it's simple, but it's not necessarily applied knowledge. When they do that, and then you see the corporation just take off like 40% in like 90 days, which is kind of the track record that I've had with these companies, it's like, holy cow, man. Where have you been? And I'm like, well, I've been there. You just didn't know it. Right. And that's never a good position to be in, right? Where you're the best kept secret. That's certainly not what I'm trying to do. But I found something I'm really passionate about. And it took me, 3 companies to figure out exactly who I am, what I want to be, where I want to show up in this world. And I'm so blessed and fortunate for those experiences. But now to be living what I get to enjoy every single day, I truly am. I'm very blessed.
I think they call that the master will appear when the student is ready,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, so your typical client, who is your typical client?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I've been all over the map. I mean, I've helped the healthcare companies, I've helped people with staffing. I think the best way for me to explain my typical client is it's somebody that believes in a growth mindset. That's where I cap it. It's an executive team that says, look, we're doing great. We could be doing a heck of a lot better. We want to improve. So I know my marketing firm would tell me to niche down to exactly who this is. I haven't found that to be the case for me. I've found that if they want to get better, that's my perfect client. So I've worked with bigger companies. I've worked with smaller companies. The truth is, if they have a growth mindset, we are simpatico. We're going to do some great things together.
And your book, how long has your book been out? You've got two books, I think I saw.
I do. Yeah. So let's see, February of 2020. So about a month before the pandemic hit, the first book launched. That was interesting.
People were home
And
to read it.
There was also every speaking gig went, which was interesting. And then the second one is called Champions Daily Playbook. And to call that a book is probably not proper because it's really 11 pages of text, but it's the one-on-one coaching that I was doing with clients. That's why I wrote the second book, because I want people to have access to it. I just don't want to always be there holding them accountable. And so that one is really, I call it a playbook because I don't want it to be a workbook. It's something that if you have fun with it, if you really consider it as play, you will accomplish any goal you set out for in 90 days if you just follow it. And so that's the second one. And then my third book is coming out in, oh my gosh, 2 weeks. That one's called Upgrade. And that was really a lot of just my thoughts around personal development and leadership. And again, these were things that I was writing about, and I just decided to put it in one spot. So I'm excited for that one because that was a lot of work. And I really hope people resonate with it and it helps.
Do you enjoy the writing?
I knew you were going to ask that. Yes, I do. I don't know that I love the entire putting the book together process. I ask myself every time, why did I do this again? But the truth is that's my ego saying, you know what? I don't want to go through all the times writing. I don't want to spend the late nights. I don't want to do all the editing. When the truth is, when that finished product is done, it is amazing because that gave me 6 to, like you said, 5 years. My first book was about 3 years, 3 years of really journaling and brain dumping. And so it's actually become a very selfish endeavor because I benefit so much by doing the writing. So it's a long-winded answer to say yes and no. The writing process has been something I do enjoy, but not in the moment.
All right. So let me get down to, I would call it my specific audience, and a couple of questions I always like to ask people. So if you think about my audience, these are people that are either building a business, they're launching, or they've got a business and they're trying to scale, right? I am more of a tactical, strategic, specific kind of guy when I do coaching. It's like you need to do this, this, this in your business. Uh, your coaching is on a different level than mine, something that I'm probably not as good at, and I'm nowhere near as good at the you. So let's take this typical client. They're either launching their business or they're rolling along and they haven't figured out quite how to scale it. What would be a couple of pieces of business advice you would give these people? We're getting free
Who
coaching here from JM. So here we go.
I always start with the basic question is, who are you? What are your values? And does everyone on your team know it? Now, that's a very loaded question because I was the same person that was doing these values in the room, thinking that, oh, because we wrote this amazing mission statement or vision statement or whatever, that everybody in our group knows what it is. And I painfully learned in my second company with doing a speech in front of about 1,500 people that 99% of them had no idea what our values were, why we existed. They were there literally just to receive a paycheck. And it was a really important lesson for me to know because They didn't know why they wanted to come here and crush it every single day, why their vision sat and fit inside of our vision. And so what I train on is really to get your values down to 3 and to share those with your team every single meeting, because that nice looking plaque on the wall that somebody walks by every single day, that's not sitting home. It's not hitting home for them. Before we start every single meeting at companies that I work with, we're very specific on, these are our cultural values. This is why we exist. This is why we do what we do. So everybody is reminded. Now, the vision has to be big enough for everyone else's vision to fall inside of it. If it does not, you will eventually lose that person. It's just the way it works. So that's maybe the easiest way to start is, what is your cultural values of your company? And does everyone know it? And I already know the answer, unfortunately, for 99% of the companies, they don't. And that's something that gives me retention of a job for a long time, because once you do that, oh man, it's so cool to see everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. Morale goes up. People are fired up. And then the other thing is, how do you behave when you show up at your company? What is the expectations? And that sounds so simple, but when you ask people, well, I think I'm supposed to. No, I want it to be clear that you're going to be present, accountable, and competitive, or whatever that behavior model is for that company. When you set that out for people and they're clear on expectations, now they get to show up as their best self. So that maybe those 2 things would be the most helpful.
Have you found that those people on the 3 values, are they similar within companies that you work with, or are they all different all the time?
Always different, and it's really fun. So for instance, with me, my first 3 companies, I always had fun as part of a value, because life is too short to not have fun. And so that was mine. But like, for instance, I'm working with a group where innovation is extremely important to them. Family, and gosh, I got to think of it. Family, innovation, and I think it was competitive. And so they have theirs. So the one thing I do suggest is, people always be like, integrity. And I'm like, to me, that's as Patrick Lencioni wrote in his books, that's a permission to play value. That's like, you're not welcome here if you don't have integrity. So I do try to keep people to stay away from the ones that really should be expected, but really, how do you want to show up to the world? Why are you different from other companies?
When you tell somebody that, do they go, what do you mean? I don't understand why we can't use it. What? I mean, do you find that like you're going to make me think?
Yeah, it is fascinating that when you initially, people are like, oh, I've heard this. And I'm like, okay, cool. You don't have to do it. However, if you do, it's funny. Business people, when you talk numbers, then they're like, oh, okay. So if I could imagine for a moment, if you can increase your production by 40% in 90 days, are you willing to do the exercise? Well, I said, no, literally, if you're willing to take a 90-day risk to do this exercise, is it worth it? Well, of course it's worth it. Cool. I need you and your team in a room for 2 to 3 days, if it takes that long, to really get it out there. Now, once we get that, we're going to build what I call a 1 sheet, and we're going to share it with your entire team, your entire company, whether it's 1,000 people, 10,000 people, or 100 people. Everyone will know exactly what your values are, how you behave, and what are we trying to accomplish this quarter, this year. Is everyone clear on that?
It's good stuff, man. That is good stuff. You asked me this one, so I'm going to ask you back. Give me your top 3 on your reading list.
Oh, such a good question. Man's Search for Meaning. Literally a book that everyone should read at some point in their life. Viktor Frankl, it's brilliant. Mindset, just because Carol Dweck, growth mindset is one of the most important ideas, in my opinion. Oh, this is a hard one. There's so many good books I'm going to leave out. I'm going to go with The Advantage is one by Lencioni. I love that as a business book. I think it's underrated. Obviously John Maxwell. Gosh, I could go on forever. But
Those are good. I haven't read those, so I'm going to go after those 3. That's what I was looking for.
Awesome.
All right, Jam. How can the audience get a hold of you if they want to talk to you more about what you do?
Well, first, go listen to the Let's Go Win podcast because Brian did absolutely crush it. It was an awesome interview. So go check it out. Make sure and share that out. Let's Go Win 365 on any social media platform. And if you just look up Let's Go Win, you'll see this face, good, bad, or indifferent. This is what you get. And yeah, man, I'd love to connect with anybody that is looking to just get better. I truly am.
Let's Go Win 365. All right, that wraps up today's show. I appreciate everyone listening. Hope you all come back for the next episode of the Force Multiplier podcast. I'm your host, Brian Will. And remember, you have to be in the game to win the game. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you would like to get more information on either of my books, joining the Force Multiplier Mastermind, or my one-on-one coaching programs, you can find me at www.brianwillmedia.com.